Olan tüm halk
ضخم تبدو آثاره انفجار ثاني وانفجارات كبيرة وهائلة، وربما هذا ما أشار له المسؤولون العسكريون.
The United States is in a state of confusion and surprise.
We fear this. We fear that they have something out that majority of the people don't know about.
olan tüm halkların hakları gibi haklar. Ne aşağı ne yukarı, ne fazla ne az.
Pent-up feelings that may result from decades of repression and people who've had members of their family killed by that regime.
A lot of killers. Get a lot of killers. Why you think our country's so innocent?
But I won't attack it because someone fixed me on it. I don't let anybody use me to fight their battles.
Hello. Welcome to Tuesday night. I hope you all enjoyed the pissant political spectacle that you called a debate. I mean, after all, both J.D. Vance, working class with the help from an Ohio senator turned good in Ivy League and obsessed with weird shit on Twitter, and Walls, good old working class teacher from a rural red district who let his lack of progressive flag fly tonight, since everything is tacking right wing, every single fucking thing. We get to watch this nothing burger of the debate and pretend like it's politics that matters. You know, on a day where 200 missiles flew from Iran, half of which seem to have gotten through the quote Iron Dome, although they didn't really hit heavily populated areas. And the great debate amongst military strategists seems to be if that was because Iran wasn't aiming for militaries. If that was Iran wasn't generally aiming for civilian casualties, which is probably true, or because the Iron Dome deflected the heavily populated areas first, also probably true. On a day where the current vice president is trying to not deal with the fact that the presidency doesn't seem to care that it's getting outed, that their whole thing about trying to de-escalate is either A, a lie, B, they're too incompetent to do it, or 3, they're too incompetent to really push because they know that they would be shown to not have power over Bibi. I don't know which one is true. It seems like it mostly hit air bases, yeah. We'll see how that goes. I don't claim to be a military specialist. I just read the news a lot. But and watch what people say on Twitter and try to compare all that. Not that Twitter is a particularly good source of news, but neither is any fucking thing else. So why should we take it a whole lot more seriously? But as far as October surprises go, I mean, I don't think we're even done with them yet. We definitely have boots on the ground in Lebanon. We have at least 41K dead in Gaza. If the Lancet from a few months ago is right, double that. Mohammed bin Salman is now talking about the need for recognition of Palestine for him to normalize relations with Israel, and that motherfucker seemed to have wanted nothing more in the last few years than to be able to normalize relations with Israel. Oh yeah, we're not even talking. Yes, a lot of the bases in the U.S. are vulnerable. Plus, it's pretty clear that the U.S. has put troops on the ground as the same way that they put that base in Itaewon and Seoul, South Korea, during the Korean War, so it could get blown up and commit U.S. troops to the situation. Which is, by the way, me saying about the now defunct base in Itaewon. That's a fact. That's even been acknowledged by the military. That's what that was for. It serves. That's why they always sent green troops there. They were basically get blown up to commit us to the war squad. Now I'm saying this because back home today, Hurricane Helene, an hour and a half from my house, where my former college roommate grew up in Conyers, Georgia, it's currently in clouds of chemical fire, and my brother, who was on the coast of Georgia, has no power for 5 fucking days. The earliest they're predicting he will have power back is October 4th or October 5th. And you're supposed to tell me that we're supposed to give a shit about this election? Never in my life have I heard as much BS about how this election is the greatest of all time. Well, every election is the fucking greatest of all time because we keep on tacking right. Yeah. FEMA funds, kneecap, all the local infrastructure in the Southeast, even in a relatively rich Southeastern state like Georgia, seems to be utterly fucked. When I say rich Southeastern state, it's just comparing it to Alabama, Mississippi, and South Carolina. Asheville being flooded that far inland blows my fucking mind, too. That's not normally even a flood zone. So yeah, I'm pretty angry. When I always talk about the peripheries and hinterlands within the core, like even in a place like New York and California, there are peripheries within those states, like Chico and Humboldt County, they get fucked while the Bay Area gets rebuilt pretty quickly. Or during Hurricane Sandy, some parts of upstate New York were probably left to rot. But just to remind you, in the mid 90s, I believe it was 1994, I know I was about 14 or 15 years old. Juliet, that place famous because of the fried green tomatoes movie. Juliet, Georgia was underwater. We didn't have potable water in Macon and Gray, where I was living, for over a fucking month. We had rolling power outages, something I've dealt with before. I mean, I dealt with it in South Korea too. There's one summer when I lived in South Korea where I was basically stuck 14 floors up and would occasionally wade my ass down, go through about 4 feet of water to try to get to the local market to buy food. All right. They have always let those areas rot. It's not new. Macon is a good sized city. It used to be a lot bigger of a city than it is now. It's been totally allowed to rot because of a variety of reasons. Once YKK downsized and the tobacco plants left and the paper mill closed, there was hardly any employment there. Out here in the West, fire season's been not as brutal as some years, but pretty brutal. We keep on building and building and building out here without any capacity for water for the people that we're trying to encourage to move here. I went back to some of the rural areas around Dublin, Georgia, when I went back home a year ago to bury my fucking mom. And It was even worse than when I lived there in the 90s. But another example of that, I was recently in Woodside, California, visiting a friend of mine, which tells you which kind of world she was in. And I had to drive up again through Humboldt County. I'm mentioning it again, and the fucking roads were falling off the goddamn side of the hills. So, while we're all participating in this great political spectacle, everything's falling a fucking apart. I got in an argument with a Democrat. I got in an argument with a lot of people today. But I got in an argument with a Democrat today about, a bunch of things. The initial comparison was Iran was like the bombing of Dresden. And I was like, if they hit civilians, then yeah, but they clearly didn't try that hard. The Amazon is still on fire. I'm not even going to get into what I've been studying about the lumpen bourgeoisie integrating into the formal market and how that's actually become very vital to the functioning of the entire world economy. But, whatever. But beyond the comparison to Dresden, which is not really a valid comparison, if they were targeting massive civilians, then maybe. But that's a lot more like what's happening in southern Lebanon than what's happening in Israel. Yes, lumpen bourgeoisie includes the cartels in so much that they exist. And I don't like the title of the Cartels Do Not Exist book, although the point it makes about them being integrated with the formal governments. The lumpen bourgeoisie is like mafia bosses, illegal mining, which a lot of the cartels in Brazil and Latin America have moved into because it's actually safer to move illegal gold than it is to move narcotics. It's all interconnected. So our infrastructure is fucking rotting. The UK, I don't even know. I've been talking to people over there. It feels like it's just falling slowly sinking into the sea. Meanwhile, you're supposed to convince me to care. Convince me to care about whether or not our cop in chief versus Cheeto Benito, frankly, I am way more worried about where the MAGA movement is headed after Trump than during. And if I had to have a guess on the way this election is going to go, it's a coin flip, slightly favoring Trump. Not because he's going to win the popular vote, because he's definitely not, but because the states in question are probably easier for him to take. So yeah, I'm pretty fucking mad. That I didn't even get into today before I saw this stuff pop off, that I read the Atlantic piece on student literacy and was like, yeah, they can't read. But, by the way, we have stats and prove this, but even in elite colleges, they can't really read anymore. So, I'm dealing with the people who can't contextualize their own lives in a lot of ways, and it really shows up. And I don't blame students for that. It's media choices and Atlantic and cultural choices and the flops in progressive education. And I know people don't suspect me to hate progressive education, but I kind of do. All right. You aren't helping people by devaluing the one institution that gave them access to knowledge by pretending that if you just juke the stats, that everyone's going to be okay. So, yeah, on almost every front, everything I see, and I'm not even getting to the fact I've been dealing with a healthcare system lately. It takes me months to get in to get tests and whatnot. If I was dealing with this 5 years ago when my ex-wife had cancer, she'd be dead. Oh no, the thing is, I wanted to be like, oh, it's just the Atlantic. Because the Atlantic is just a magazine that exists to make me feel like I miss Harper's in the 1990s and aughts. But when I read the Atlantic piece, unfortunately, it is backed up by my experience of even elite students. So we got war, we got general social malaise, we got decay. I don't know what the fuck is going on in Europe. I don't know what the fuck is going on in Asia. I mean, I do, but I can't even make a picture of it anymore. I mean, you got Macron deciding that Melachon is worth some kind of soft Vichy government. You have increasing right-wing parties in Japan. You have China's been awfully quiet lately. You notice that? You have the fact that the situation in Russia and Ukraine seems like it's going to go on for a while. I was hoping that the Iranians were going to try to leverage this moment of chaos to get a nuclear deal through, but that's clearly out the door once Nasrallah was killed. My Democratic friend today was like, well, they had to relocate 60,000 people from the border of Israel. And I'm like, okay, yeah. And they moved them to a tourist city in the Red Sea, as opposed to between 40 and 80,000 Palestinians dead. Where are these people fucking coming from? Gene, we should bring back Game and Materialist. We should do something. Actually, I've thought about it, even though I've given up. Oh yeah, I'm not going to talk about how I finally got rid of my D&D books. I still have role-playing books back there, but it's only you see Call of Cthulhu, Delta Green, Vaesen, and Symbolon. I got rid of all. There's other stuff. I still have my Mothership and stuff like that. But no, Biden will be remembered as a terrible statesman, and I mean, look, Trump was previously the most unpopular president in American history, and the Democrats have managed to fuck that up. Now, there's crises everywhere, okay? The left, for a while, was trying to pick a side in this whole debacle where it could pretend that someone somewhere could save us. And I've noticed that we are moving away from that. Some of that's because of the internal politics around Twitter, where the logical implications of certain people's politics get manifested by some weirdo sectarian group taking it to the nth degree. You know who I'm implying, and then people freaking out in the other direction. But that methodological nationalism was there from the beginning. And people are doubling down on it because they can't imagine what a new social ontology, to use a big word, but I really do mean it, is ontology. It is a framework for which we understand the world, would be based out of. Now, I was glad that we saw movement to, I had the uncommitted people come on the show. But even then, I said it was a long shot, and that foreign policy in particular is not responsive to democratic inputs. And that's been true since the War Powers Act. eventually methodological nationalism just becomes nationalism, and it comes in a lot of ways, but it slows down your imaginary. I mean, we have blue MAGA and red MAGA, and I can't think of any two people I want to fist fight in hell more than those two groups. See, what's funny about this is you guys are right. The status quo has been collapsing for a long time, but the counter-systemic has been circling the drain. All movement going nowhere until liquidation. We just sort of hope we avoid a world war. And all of the things in society are contradictory. The longshoremen are fighting automation right now and striking, and it's going to bring a lot of people to their knees. But I can tell you, while they might be pushing back on some of the worst aspects of automation, they're not going to win all of automation. All right. I can't think of a time in history where a group of workers has been able to shut out all of a technology. Now, automation under capitalism is bad, and the automation we're getting has been particularly shitty. And trust me, they want to do more than they are. Part of the reason why the stock market's having such a bad time is they didn't get the labor discipline they wanted to get out of this whole AI thing, because it's not yet an efficient technology. And the AI bubble has been showing signs of weakening for 6 months. And trust me, like, I can't think of even someone with the tactical peace dividends of George Herbert Walker fucking Bush, who knew he had to denuclearize South Africa, even if they weren't recognizing apartheid at the time. We don't even get that. Biden's Walter Mondale Democrat politics gave progressives and Democratic socialists some kind of weird false hope again. And I'm tired of those fuckers getting false hope. If I hear one more goddamn thing about Bernie, which frankly, at this point, does seem to indicate to most people that people are out of touch. But, oh my God. The DSA today is taking around its fee waivers because it's made horrendous financial decisions by trying to run massive electoral campaigns, which are hella expensive, without having, big backers like some of the other weird sects do, even though it's like exponentially larger than them. And because it doesn't get any payback for gifts it gives the Democratic Party, it's going to chase out a lot of the remaining 52,000 members. I mean, if I had lost half my membership in it's this short of a time, and the only time I can think of something losing such low intensity membership that fast is like the CPUSA during the Red Scare. It's all so very pathetic. So we're going back to the weird sectarian forms that served us so well during the 80s and 90s in a moment of actual real fucking crisis. G's trolling me about joining the ACP. Oh my God. All right. So yeah, I'm pissed off. No, as I've been saying now for like, I don't know, almost a decade, that what happened in the aught teens is politics started replacing subcultures for personal identity because the instability of commercial culture after the Great Recession. But ironically, that has meant actually a sign that we actually are not in a political moment. If there was a political moment around the issue, it was between 2012 and 2016 in the response to the Obama movement. But the moment everyone did join together and saying kumbaya with liberals to fight the Trumpists because some scary shit happened in North Carolina, which we all then normalized the policies around anyway. Politics requires embodied participation in a Polish art community. Your opinions about politics are actually not all that relevant aside from that. Now, when I've said that in the past, I got chastised for localism. But my point was, you can't just flip, oh, localism was a mistake. Let's just go try to run some weird Bonapartist campaign and just flip everything from the executive office first before we've even bit the structures to get the unions back in a good position, which they're in contradictory positions all over the place. I mean, we haven't even talked about the contradictory positions of the unions. I mean, the longshoremen, for example, are not going to slow down military shipments to Gaza, and we know why they're not. I mean, like while that's shitty, absolutely shitty, we also know that if they did, the National Guard would be armed and at their doors real fucking fast. Yes, I actually have been reading Eric Olin Wright behind the Patreon and getting mad at the Understanding Class book because it's so from a different moment. Um, but I remember being an anti-capitalist in the 21st century. Oh yeah, and Bernard Henri Levy is always do that. But let's talk about Bernard Henri Levy. I watched him debate Alexander Dugin. Actually, you can go find it on Ben Burgess' channel because Ben decided to bring me on because I know all this stuff, and I guess he wanted to hurt me deeply. No, Ben loves me, but that's not the point. I'm the one like ultra leftist that's in Ben's life, but no, probably not the only one. I'm the one that doesn't insult him all the time. My but I went in and watched it, and that Henri Levy piece actually made me like go, man, it makes Dugin look good, and that's saying a lot because you guys know how I feel about Duginism. Um, but all this national political stuff has been a way for people to not really engage. And and I'm not saying this to shit on the stuff about the Gaza progress. Um, but I've been horrified since I don't know 2016. If you guys go back and watch a stream I did on the first visit with Kuba and Gene on the Israeli-Palestinian question, I don't know 4 years ago, it was right before the peaceful attempt to break this shit. I guess in 2011. I mean, not 11, 2021, where those protesters were shot then too. I had been feeling like we've been gearing up for a massacre for a long, long time. Oh yeah, Bernard Henri Levy. Yeah, he's awful. Yeah, I know we were right, Gene. The unsustainability of Israeli policy is really hard for me to reconcile around because the other thing that's going to lead to is a world war. I mean, fuck, if you think what happened in World War One was a trigger. Most of the people that I like have that used to comment on politics with me have given up on it. Who is my audience when we say people who watch my show? It's kind of a circular reference. I don't have a particular audience that I'm actually aiming for. It's a pan leftist audience, but I'll be quite frank with you. I'm not happy with any tendency in the left at this point. I mean, I have people that I dislike less. Yeah, that is the question. What is Russia or China going to do? So far, they've been very political and putting their hands on this stuff. And there's good reasons for it. I mean, I think the second most spoken language, second language in Israel is Russian after English. And when Russia got heavily sanctioned by the West, as long as it wasn't military equipment and some other things, that the West turned a blind eye to Israeli trade with Russia. However, this has really pushed it because their other primary ally is Iran, and thus you've seen a lot of weird maneuvering there. The want for stable relations really belies a whole lot of people's geopolitical fantasies. No one expected 10-7, but once 10-7, I didn't either. But once 10-7 happened, this is what I expected. I got in fights for people for days, and people kept on thinking that I was like, saying Hamas should be crushed or whatever. And I was just like, no, what's likely to happen though is a massacre. And then for months, people would say, "Oh, Israel's going to lose. Hamas is going to win." And in so much that Hamas will probably still exist at the end of this, which is kind of the asymmetrical warfare winning, maybe. But in so much as stopping a massacre of hundreds of tens of thousands, not hundreds yet, maybe, of Gazan civilians, I have no idea. It's been so bad, it's hard for me to call this a fucking war until the stuff happened with Lebanon. We do need left people coordinating disaster relief. The problem is the window of left size has gone down. And they're not in those areas, okay? They're just not. There's DSA in Atlanta. There's not even that many. Like when I was in Macon, Georgia, and admittedly, this was 15 years ago. There were no left orgs in my state. Now there's DSA in Atlanta. I'm sure there's PSL in Atlanta too. But outside of Atlanta, what is there? And these are not non-populated places. This is not like Utah, where there's a valley where everyone lives, and then the west is, and then the west of it is nothing. All right, it's like government land and desert and the Canyonlands and stuff like that. Whereas Georgia is a pretty populated state. What is Egypt and Saudi Arabia's current relationship with the Israeli government? It's getting more hostile, but they have tried to have good relations. They want to normalize relations with Israel, but they don't want to broadcast it too loudly because it would cause domestic disputes. However, this is even hard for Al-Sisi to take. But just so you know, for example, it's not like Egypt hasn't been requiring massive, expensive border papers. That's why people have been getting hit with all these, like, we need money campaigns, and everyone was trying to, like, microfund people out of Gaza. Sisi has been trying to build a new capital in the middle of the desert now since I left. And while he has some Chinese involvement in that, it's never been particularly popular. And yeah, Egypt may be very close to a war with Ethiopia, not to deal with Ethiopia's relations with everybody else. Everything is popping off. All these things that have been bottled up are going to come out now. People in Georgia will take help where they can get it, but yeah, they're not going to just become socialist because you brand it that way. I mean, look, I hate to use a conservative metaphor pulled from Machiavelli as picked up by Pareto, but I'm going to use it. We live in an age of foxes where there are a few lions, and the lions that do exist are kind of dumb. But the foxes, so to speak, have been in charge for so long, their cunning really isn't cunning anymore. Now, look, I would expand the metaphor with who could take in the refugees? I don't even know. Not all of them. Who are the lions? Russia. In the United States, there are none. I mean, I don't even know what to call Trump, a hedgehog, maybe? He's a demagogue that tells everyone what they want to hear, and he has a lizard brain intelligence for it. But you could go into any one of his speeches in the past 10 years and be a war hawk or a paleo conservative peacenik and like what he has to say in any direction. We've heard this stuff about the BRICS, but like, look at the tension between Brazil and Venezuela. The reality of geopolitics seems to be beyond the capacity of a lot of people to deal with. Look at the Middle East. All right. Look at the Middle East. Outside of opposition to Israel, try to figure out who's in line with who. The idea that it's Shia versus Sunni doesn't even hold. But the number of excess deaths worldwide, okay, is pretty startling. Look, you know, the Fed seemed to try to want to cause an unemployment crisis to kind of fix everything. And they couldn't because, by the way, people are retiring. 10% of working age men between the ages of 25 and 55 don't work. We don't know why. Some of them are stay-at-home parents now because their wives are working. We do know that for some of them. But when you look at the working class blue collar men, and I've done stats on this channel, what do you see? They're not even consistently employed. They have no exposure to children by and large. They are not dating, they're not marrying. They don't even report having friends. I suspect what they're getting caught up in is online stuff and video games. Like, we can all be in our microcultures, right? Like, you can be like me, like, you could be a person like me who has a few thousand followers on Twitter and actually pretty high engagement on Patreon. I will give myself a pat on the back for that. My YouTube channel numbers are shit because I won't monetize and I won't pay for bot subscriptions. But nonetheless, right? But I'm not foolish enough to believe in any world that I am creating a political movement. And look, I know my point of, I have good insurance, okay? I have good insurance through my partner, right? That everyone thinks teachers have good insurance. Our insurance is actually, like, I have friends on Obamacare subsidy insurance. It's actually better than my insurance that I would have available from my employer. But I have decent insurance, and even with decent insurance, and even with documented medical needs and having 2 emergency trips to the ER, it still took me 3 months to get into a general practitioner because we don't have anyone in that field anymore. We are desperate for teachers and nurses and doctors. Desperate. And you know what? The largest batch of baby boomers, the baby boomers without pensions who got fucked over in the ending of the pension system, which, by the way, was never smart to make on private funds anyway. That was always going to be a disaster. I hate to sound like a neoliberal here, but anyone who like thought about exponential growth curves should have seen that coming. But putting them on the stock market as a means around means that we have a bunch of people retiring who do not have means. Now, that's still dealing with baby boomers. It's the younger, more fucked baby boomers, but they also lost a lot of their wealth in the Great Recession. And people think that a bunch of this, now it is for the rich. The richest children, you got a bunch of formerly agitated millennials who have rich parents who are not as agitated anymore. That's absolutely true. But for a grand amount of the, quote, middle class, between reverse mortgages and healthcare, that shit's gone. And you know what's getting it? The universities, because the university medical systems make most of their money from being rentiers in their stock market portfolios and their hospital system. They don't make that much money on education. That's why they don't give a fuck about it. The universities that don't have those massive endowments are not going to stay open, which means that, like in the past, I just went through, and it's coming out in months because I schedule so much ahead of time. Which means that the university system is going through cycles like we've seen in the historic past. The university systems have grown and shrunk many times in Western history. In Western history, I'm not even talking about places like India and China, where I could do exponential kinds of studies. I just would have to sit down with a scholar who knew it. It gets way more money from a sprawling medical campus than its sports programs and licensing. And the other source of money is rentier shit. So if you're going to ask yourself why we can't get anything done, who is one of the largest Democratic supporting demographics in the country? I've taught for 17 years in 4 countries. I now teach online because the stress of being in person was actually beginning to get to me. Do I think online education works? Kinda. For high schoolers. I do not really suggest it for anybody below the age of 13 or 14. And not anyone who also has significant problems at home, which unfortunately is a lot of the people attracted to my program because they have to work. And we're not even getting to the fact that red states have such labor populations, they're reversing labor laws, and very few people, the Democrats aren't doing shit about that. They're not doing shit about the child labor laws going away. I shared a post about that on Facebook and on Twitter recently. It's a much more extensive than you think, and it's not just about people working at mom and pop franchises. We've caught, people working on like munitions and meat packing. We're going to see a decline in student visas, which have been used to offset a lot of the problems in these situations. And we've also seen a lot of abuse of middle class, admittedly for their local area, relatively rich, but not compared to here. Students in foreign countries, I've heard horror stories. No one wants to do any kind of rationalized reform of immigration in the United States, which would take a lot of pressure off this whole time bomb, which everyone knows is there. And the left plays a role in this too. I mean, asking for the most radical reforms, but piecemeal, asking for abolishing the police, but not replacing it with universal civic service amongst the entire population, which is what you need to do to really do that. Even anarchists kind of admit that. All right. And this is not dealing with the fact that the climate crisis is only going to get worse. And we think of it only in terms of climate change, but environmental degradation is everywhere in deep now. And it's a lot more than just climate change. You guys can listen to the weird, creepy VV debate between folksy Wisconsin progressive, who I don't hate, but who has been tacking to the right since that seems to be what the Harris campaign is asking him to do, and JD Vance, who in another world is has a similar path trajectory to me, except I didn't go into the military, didn't have a state senator help me get special placement. I'm not into weirdos political subcultures anymore. Oh, I don't have that great of anarchist, man. The better anarchists approach me. I don't deal with people on college campuses. You didn't convert to Catholicism. When I was a paleocon, I actually was tempted for a second, but my prior beliefs made that impossible. For those of you who don't know, half my family is Catholic. I'm not sure that Vance is actually playing the long game that well, though, because he's universally hated. I mean, we said that about DeSantis, too. However, there is a post-Trump game. Even if Trump wins, he's old. I find it perplexing that many people shifted from libertarian to MAGA. Well, just like many people shifted from Democrat to Bernie-crat to ML in the last few years. I mean, those are trajectories that don't really make sense, except there's a rational core in it. No, and you're right. For all the incoherence of Project 2025 and the way that even Trump wants to move away from it because it makes the demagoguery too obvious and too contradictory. Like you see the fact that if they actually tried to implement that, the Joint Chiefs of Staff would probably coup them. But the real thing to look at, because like gold standard and this and that and getting rid of all your labor protections, blah 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 blah. But the fact is, they at least could state a vision to get people on board. And like, what is anybody on the left or even in the center liberal sphere doing about that? Jack and shit. There is no vision. It's all defensive. And it's defensiveness that if the Democrats won, they would lose. So they have no reason to try to win it at the national level. We saw this for years with Roe versus Wade. They could have codified that in the first Obama administration. They could have codified it in the 90s. They knew what was going to happen with the courts, and yet they never did. The idea, my friend Elijah Emery came on. I was like, well, Trump will run until he dies in like 2036 or whatever, which Trump has now said he won't do. And I'm just like, you guys hope that because that's a reason to stay a Democrat. Here's the thing. It's not just about better rhetoric and better reforms. I wish I agree with the left reckoning people on that. As much as I've liked a lot of the stuff that David has said recently, I didn't like what he was saying early on about the squad because I consider it like weirdly for the problems he sees in the mainstay of the Democrats, and he's rightly angry about it. He's all of a sudden drops it about the squad capitulating to them. But nonetheless, I get that. It's also about the fact we do not have parastate institutions to do it, and we don't seem to be able to scale them to anything. All that mutual aid that developed after the insurrections around George Floyd, it just exhausted in the charity. But then what do people do in response to that? Oh, go vote. Go vote. How has this ended up, by the way? It ended up with somehow a statement coming out of the National Political Committee of the DSA claiming some kind of weird victory because Harris got Biden, as if they had any fucking thing to do it, on the day that Cori Bush lost after Jamal Bowman lost. Which, by the way, yes, you can blame on AIPAC, except that AIPAC wasn't able to get the people who had strong relations with their constituents. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, which I tell you, AIPAC wanted more than get rid of Bowman or Bush. When we say we need to vote for a third party, what third party you're going to fucking vote for? All of them are trying to do this. We take over the government from the top, even though we can't get 5% of the vote shit, which has never worked. Yeah, Griscom insulted me when I said that the whole thing about Bowman was a tempest in a teapot, and the people had the right to complain about him. Although it did make a certain electoral calculus very difficult. But what really made it, to go back to Bowman flashbacks, what really made it obvious is when I watched the rally with AOC and Bernie in the greater New York area attract like 200 people and like 25 counter protesters. When I saw that, I knew that the whole debate was not fucking worth it. Everyone was done. I've drank with David back when I drank more. Which, by the way, I have been on the straight and narrow path for the most part for a while now. I'm not in good enough health not to be. I mean, I feel a little I'm not a teetotaler, but I'm pretty close. Um I feel a little betrayed by all this myself. Not by the Democrats. It'd be dumb to feel betrayed by the Democrats. Like if you feel betrayed by the Democrats, you weren't paying attention. Are you a friend of Bill? Bill who? Which Bill? There's lots of Bills in my life. You don't do this for fucking 14 years. Okay, to put it in perspective, I have been involved in left media since 2010. I have been involved in left podcasting since 2011. Oh, AA. No, I'm not a fan of AA because my father fucked around with it and it didn't do any goddamn thing. I'm not an alcoholic. I have other problems. But if people need AA, I'm not going to belittle them either. Oh, the conservatives have never been more popular in Canada, and I don't know how Trudeau can hang on forever. And I want people to look at how things are going. I mean, things aren't going well in the UK, despite the Labour victory. Things are going really poorly in France, and in despite the fact that Front Populaire put up a real admirable showing, and their Popular Front wasn't our dumb shit. But yet, they have to have Macron to do something, and Macron would rather work with the Le Penites. So we know where we are. Yeah, I was about to say, if you need that community, I'm not going to belittle anyone. I've told people who are in AI that they should stay. I was talking to I went one time. I almost called him by his real name, and I don't know if he uses that publicly now or not. I think he does. Um, about this earlier. But everyone's got a crisis of legitimacy. Who looks legitimate right now? Everything feels like a joke. People don't like Macron. Of course they don't like Macron. People don't like dirty, slimy centrist. You don't. As a teacher, I can say, you should be careful trusting teachers' pets. What's the motivation for you continually being a Marxist despite none of this shit going anywhere? I realize I'm just interested in this out of my own intellectual curiosity, not changing the world. I am interested in people being able to think through the situation to change the world when there's enough people to do it. I'm basically been a remnantist for a long time. In some ways, I hate to tell you guys, I'm not speaking to you. I'm speaking to the people I hope you teach. It's the crisis of legitimacy about specific politicians, or is expanding the parties and entire systems, though? I think it's expanding to entire systems. But what does that mean exactly? Because people don't really have an alternative to it in there either, right? Is World War III perfect? Are people being hyperbolic? On that, I really don't know. It all depends what happens in the next 48 hours. How bad does Israel retaliate? How bad does Israel retaliate? But I don't know. I'm not playing prognosticator about the future anymore. All right. Because my priors are fucked. When my priors were based off of status quo and we didn't have 50 fucking black swans everywhere, I could predict pretty well what was going to happen. For example, I knew, even when I argued with Doug Lane about it, that Trump was a possibility and that it would lead to all kinds of pseudo, like, injection of counter-systemic force to the left that would unify them the way it unified the counter-systemic forces when people woke up in 2003 against George Bush. I had talked about the docks. I've said that the dock workers have that, dock workers have monopoly hold and they can hold things status, but their ability to keep out all automation is going to be really hard. Crisis of legitimacy is about institutions, not personalities, right? Yeah. Macron is just a wart and a butthole of a much larger thing. Has Chris Catron gone batty? I don't know. Catron is Catron. Black Swan generator work overtime by child labor. I feel that way. Here's what I'm going to tell you. All right. The peripheries within the core are going to look a lot more like the peripheries everywhere else. And you're going to watch it happen. But because of the location of most socialists, being in areas of liberal legitimacy, like New York and California, because they are kind of like an internal, demographic group, I don't know what that means. Trying to set all kinds of things about. Are you a core periphery in Portugal? You're a core periphery. Just like you are to the EU what Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi and like half of the Midwest is to the United States. Although, I've never been to Portugal. I've been to Spain. I've been to Italy, mostly going back and forth to the Middle East, actually. But I don't, despite the fact I like to pick on Europeans because I think the American obsession with Europeans for so long and always listening to them was not always a great idea. I remember like liberals when they first discovered we can listen to the BBC about the internet when I was in college, and it was like, okay, so you get the British press, slightly better than the American press. Woo, woo, woo. Could the U.S. officially break up? Not anytime real soon without triggering Texas versus White, which would be a civil war. And the other thing about it is it's not clear, like, even though there's clear red states and blue states, it's actually an urban versus suburban versus rural divide. And it's also class divides. Although the working class is definitely checked out, and if they aren't checked out, they're mostly on the right at this point. And it's because, but most of them are checked out. And I'm like, you're complaining about Trump and with EU to be EU periphery to be flyover territory. Oh boy. The rightward shift is game theoretically predictable. Where else was the left going to go? The moment the left threw itself back into the Democratic Party with Bernie, despite what they had just been through with Obama, and we have to remind ourselves, Occupy, even though it became Occupy Democrats eventually, was against Obama's failure to do anything for the working class and even for black communities, even the lower end of the black bourgeoisie, after the 2007-2008 recession. That's what prompted Occupy. It's hard to know where anyone's going. The right's also in disarray, people. That's one of the funny things right now. The right's all over the place. That's why you got weird shit coming out of there too. I keep on using the Adorno quote, not because I love Adorno all the time, right? It's not because I don't actually agree with some of the criticisms about Adorno and whatnot. But a wrong life can't be lived rightly also means that all the political spectrum is good and well fucked. But you have to remind yourself, however, the winning conditions for different parts of the political spectrum are radically different. Centrists and conservatives do not have the same hurdles game theoretically. They're not aiming to fundamentally change things. Conservatives are aiming to change some things. Liberals right now seem to be aiming to change very little. The GOP has no place else to go. It's only held together by a demagogue, and you see that in the responses to anybody trying to fill that demagogue's shoes. So, and on the right, we don't even get demagogues. We get like doddering senator bureaucrats and cops. Is it apt to Eugene McCarthy to the 60s Bernie Sanders? Yes. I think Lash's critique of Harrington on the way Harrington tried to do left populism twice. All right. Although the second time Lash was nicer to populism, the first time his critique of Harrington was based off Harrington trying to do populism after 68 into the McCarthy campaign, and the second time was during the Rainbow Coalition. And again, we can feel good about protests, but I've said for a long time, protests have been not particularly effective since the 70s. The origins of protest before that was to show that you could field an army, but that's a lot less relevant with the military technology we have now. Well, the Foxes run the military too. This is one of the things that's actually been truly shocking to me. How neoliberalized the military is, even against its own interest. It has fought it off for so long. I mean, it's hard, like, military Keynesianism was a thing because the military knew what it needed to maintain itself. Something broke between drones and the Iraq War, where neoliberalization was allowed to go even into places where it doesn't rationally make sense to go and was kept out of even under Reagan. Yeah, Red Berdiev, you're absolutely right. In fact, Nick Schrenecht and Alex Williams of the Left Accelerationists, I don't agree with a lot of what they said. And I often misremember them and make them Alex Schrenecht as if they're one person. I interviewed Nick a long time ago, actually, like in 2014. But they said that the left is addicted to a habitus that was developed in response to the failure of the old left in the 1940s and 50s that led to the protest left of the 60s. And we have never come up with a new tradition and habitus. We just keep on pretending that it works. Protest this, critical support for that. Usually that's not actually critical. It doesn't matter. Yes, I have read Benson Bevan's new book. My issue with Benson Bevan's book is that he's right about a lot of the problems of like the Brazilian protest. He's less right about what happened in Egypt, and I was there in the aftermath. I think the people he focuses on that led to the Tahrir thing weren't very important to what actually happened in Egypt ultimately, that got beyond them before even the Brotherhood got involved. Um, but his hope for verticalism misses that the fact that that horizontalist left came out of the failures of the verticalist left priorly. So if you had a longue durée history view, you'd see the problem. He's not a historian. He's very well educated. He speaks many languages or gets people who can help him. I'm not here to shit on Vincent Bevins, all right? But his answer is a little bit too easy. And also, it misses the fact that even if the right was able to utilize that because they were more organized, they weren't able to utilize it very well in Egypt because they were still outflanked by the military. And until this gets on, until you see something get a hold of this, you're going to see weirder and weirder incoherent abominations. Because do you expect that left ideological groupings are going to somehow transcend the incoherence of our fucking society just out of will? That's nuts. I'm not here to talk about the conscious or unconscious desire of anyone, but I will tell you that it's probably very varied and it's too limited. Thoughts on the legacy of Frederick Jameson? I like some of Jameson's work, although a literary reading of Capital is not a very useful use of your time. I mean, it's a lot of the smarter leftists of the baby boomer generation are gone. And what's replaced them, I don't know, Vivek Chibber. Yeah, the Jakarta method by Bevins was actually quite good. I will agree. Well, I mean, this is the funny thing. Even Samir Amin sided against the Brotherhood and would rather have the Egyptian military in charge before he died. He was very quiet about it, but not quiet about it at the time. I documented it. So, like, it's funny what people think Samir Amin believed because of his his like world systems version of third worldism, but he was actually often opposed to religious groups rising up within those ranks. I mean, look, I'm not against people feeding the homeless, and I've done homeless work. But if you think you're going to systemically address homelessness just by throwing food at them, you're not really dealing with the problem. Like, that's not a reason not to do it. I'm not one of these people who think, oh, we just need to make everything worse so that people will revolt. You don't know what happens when you make everything worse. It makes everything more unvolatile. You don't know the priors, right? So do what you're going to do to ameliorate people. But if you think that's doing politics, you're kind of wrong. It's part of it, but by itself, it's not. No. It's like trying to get fixed climate change by not using plastic in your house, which I'm sympathetic as a personal discipline, but I know what it's gonna like not achieve. And you have to deal with a lot of the systemic problems in these various spaces. Like, I'm not a teetotaler, and I'm not a like radical Puritan, and I'm not here to tell that there's no use of drugs, but I can tell you that drugs are decimating the working class, the blue collar working class in particular, because they don't have supports to deal with it. And That is not to say that the other classes aren't equally drug addled. They are, but they have supports to deal with it most of the time. Will teaching long form writing to students be obsolete in a few years? It's practically obsolete now. However, remember that when technologies break down, it's good to know how to do prior low tech stuff. That's why you don't want to give it all up. New technologies are more given to cascade failure. The reason why I was ever nice to democratic socialists, which are really just social democrats in America and have always been, um, was that I thought maybe if they played their cards in Congress right, we could get some reforms to ameliorate the problems that are lumpenizing large parts of the blue collar working class. You know, the people that I come from. But we didn't get that. They failed. They failed utterly and capitulated utterly. People can yell at me for saying that or pretend that if we pretend that didn't happen, that it will go away and we can try it again. I will also note that a lot of people have media careers based off this. Reading, even at a basic level, is declining. The problem that you have is now that it's a class good. I promise you, elites are not going to let their kids not learn how to read. Now, elites are letting their kids not learn how to read, but you're increasingly seeing elite schools ban computers from an inside and whatnot. And AI has been a nightmare for pedagogy, and you have public school servants saying that we should just fully embrace it. Why? Because they think that the stats being juked equals success, or they don't care that it's not the case. And I've literally heard that from various ed tech people that we now deal with sentience, which, by the way, shows that they don't know what LLMs are or what the technology really is. I mean, I hate to sound like Ed Citron. He's sometimes overly dismissive of the technology, but there is a way in which it's just not doing what it was sold as doing. It's not cheap. It's energy expensive on the back end. And I mean, we'd have to double our power grid to do what they're even kind of promising to do with it. And there's no promise that it can. It does make certain things more efficient, and it does hurt like coding jobs and low-level writing jobs and stuff like that. But we're not going to talk about education PCs. Our administrators, I can't. I get in trouble. I have a day job still, peeps. The tech hype was partly how you juked the GDP stats. No one's GDP is doing that well. America has been in America, but largely because of fallacious investment in AI. And yeah, it is totally obvious when students use Chat GPT. I don't need the checker. When I hear graduate students tell me, "Oh, I can't tell when students are using Chat GPT," I know that they also don't know how to read very well and they've gotten to graduate school somehow. A lot of those things. Look, as far as people betting around their degrees, look, I've done that all the times. I like Mumbo Jumbo by Ishmael Reed. I don't know. That feels not relevant, but yeah. I'm not starting reading anytime real soon, but I literally model. You know what that radical engagement series is about? Modeling how to engage with reading to radicals so that they can do radical reading. I'm teaching you guys on the internet the same way I would lecture students in high school. And I see how much AI slack. Like half the stuff I'm getting on YouTube now. I'm not even going to talk about fucking Facebook, which is like mostly AI generated nonsense. Um, but the funny thing about this is it's costing them a ton of money. What we're seeing about this current set of like capitalism is it's not even good at cannibalizing itself for profits. Is game theory necessary for the left? No. Game theory has its own limitations and problems. I just use game theory because it's an easy way to understand geopolitics. Do you need it? No. No, systems theory and dialectics and all that stuff would better serve you. But when I'm trying to communicate to people in a medium like this, I'm not going to be like, and we start with Aristotle and go through. Yeah, I mean, I do that sometimes, but I already get called PMC all the time, and I guess if that class means anything to you, I'm on the lower end of it as a high school teacher. Although I'm not, and I have a master's degree or two, but I always find it funny because I also come from the blue collar working class explicitly. So I'm just educated, and I often get offended by the idea that the working class can't be educated. My parents read a ton. And my father was a mechanic. My mother was a fucking Huddle House, not even a Waffle House waitress. She was a Huddle House waitress when she lost her job from Ream, until I was 19 years old, when she became a prison nurse. The definition of PMC has been floating around to mean elites I don't like and all educated people and anyone who's not blue collar and liberals. They're socialized to think they're dumb. We have betrayed them with that, and also we've allowed social pathologies to totally ravage their communities. That's why I talk about lumpen eyes. There's a whole lot of people who have lumpen habits who are blue collar working class now. Good luck on striving to be upper middle class. I tried that too. I mean, the stats I saw to live an upper middle class life that would require you to have made $70,000 to $80,000 is as late as 2018 now requires $150,000 to $170,000 if you have one kid. Well, it's like when I talk about something that is probably controversial. I am generally on the obesity acceptance side of things, insofar that I think shaming people makes them less likely to function. Right. However, um, even talking about the systemic causes of obesity in the United States and how it's tied very clearly to certain class expectations gets bracketed out as if it's just a naturally occurring category by liberals. So instead of talking about how this isn't people's fault because of systemic choices in the overall system, what we get is a talk about how we should just accept all this as if everything happened to us is good. Or that the things that upper middle class people have the resources for that poor people can deal with. Trust me. I have a brother who's in. Let me tell you the story about my youngest brother. I've never said this on air. All right. My youngest brother is incredibly drug addled. Had an accident. He's been in probation off and on for 25 out of the last 26 years. All right. He has not been able to work. In regards to worked in a meat plant, got cut, quit, has worked as a rigger and as a roadie because he can get work there because of I mean, we educated people how to eat poorly. I'll get back to that. But He had an accident doing rigging with one of his coworkers who was drunk, flipped a golf cart, damaged his head. He was let go with brain bleed because he didn't have good insurance. A year later, he tried to kill himself. And I'm going to talk to you about the epic way he tried to kill himself because you could actually look it up and figure out who my brother is, and I don't want you to do that. But let me just tell you that it involved 4 different ways, and he shot himself in the face and lived because he was so high he missed his head. I mean, he hit his head, but he blew his jaw out. That man, my youngest brother, has been failed over and over and over again. And there are 4 of us. One of us is a physical therapy doctor. One of us is me. One of us is just finishing their BA, but they work in scrum insurance and work their way up and make good money. And one of us is drug addled and is a rigger and gives all his money to probation. So I'm very aware of what the different levels of society look like. And I can tell you, we've all gone through similar problems, but because where we were in our life when they happened, we ended up in radically different places. Some of it is our own character, but some of it is larger systems of society. And the larger systems of society make having good character harder and harder to do. Right? I don't come here and tell you all my horror stories, but when people come and tell me that I have a PMC life, my uncle died in a driving truck because he had untreated diabetes. He died at 55 years old. My other uncle had untreated skin cancer. It's also a trucker, died at 59. My mother died of a 7-year battle with colon cancer. My biological father had an unexplained heart attack. All right. I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you this because I spend a lot of time working with people who see a lot of shit. I'm a teacher. Do you have any kind of idea? I work in a district that is both urban and suburban, and it's both rich and very, very poor. And I deal with a lot of immigrant families, and I deal with a lot of rich families. And when I worked in Georgia, I worked in a mostly black school district. All right. Do you know what I saw? So when this happens, and I don't talk about this a lot because I don't want my fucking life to be like somebody's political content. But when I hear certain people talk about this shit, I often know that they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. I got lucky. I got incredibly lucky, guys. I got incredibly lucky. I am privileged. I'll admit that. I don't mean it in the stupid liberal way that they mean it. I meant that I met one person in college who got me a job in South Korea when I got laid off as a public school teacher in 2000. And no, actually, I didn't even get laid off. I quit to go back to school, and they cut funding my program because I knew I was gonna get laid off. Let's be honest. They were looking for a reason to get rid of me because I was expensive, because I was highly educated as a school teacher. And I got lucky, and I got to South Korea, and I got back into higher education. I left higher education because I finished my MFA and wanted to be a professor. I really believed in that shit back then. And that got me 8 years abroad. I got to see the world on someone else's money. I got academic connections. It got me into left media. I hang out with people with Ivy League degrees now because of that. I don't have that. I'm from fucking no-name skate school. All right? Yes, I'm smart. You know, and yes, I don't have the warmest personality in the world. It's funny. Every now and then I will accidentally hit. It happens on Koosh Vlog on Reddit a lot. I don't know why. Those people seem to know who I am. And they'll say like, oh, he's not warm. And I'm like, God damn it, you're right. I'm not warm. You know, it's harder to be warm when you're from my background. But if one of you were in trouble, I'm trying to do what I can. But yeah, connections are always crucial. It's the only reason you go to fucking college. And I have elite connections now. People give a shit because what's my Myers-Briggs? In so much of that means anything, and it doesn't. But if we're going to talk about Jungian secular astrology, I'm an NITP. Yeah, amiable. Like I'm nice. And it's true. I'm kind of not. I mean, I'm not. I'm not particularly. I mean, I'll help you. I will. You know. People have hard times on my Patreon. I let them stay in my Discord. I don't. I'm really not a vulture when it comes to this stuff. I'd be a lot more successful if I was. Um, and I like the Kush vlog people. I don't. I'm not talking shit about them. I like Matt. I don't know him very well. Of the people from Chapo, he's the one that makes my stomach crawl the least. But I mean, I think left media has largely been a bad thing, and it's more and more overrun by the same people who used to be in establishment media because they don't have jobs anymore. And look, I mean, I'm not here to begrudge Chapo. I actually have a thing coming out on the Ron on the Fifth Estate, but I mean, like, I wish I could retire to Silver Lake at 44. Well, I mean, it makes somewhat sense, right? If you were to draw a line between Catrone and Kush Vlog, I'm probably in the center of that. I don't agree with Chris on a whole lot, but I don't hate him. I don't hate hardly anyone on the left. I'll complain about Dominica Lacerdo all the time, and his popularity baffles me, but I do see some good in what he does. I mean, I rant about the left in abstract all the time, right? And I used to even give Doug Henrod a lot of shit because he got real soft on the Democrats for a while, but even he's woken up. Oh yeah, we all know about the people who are trying to get back into mainstream media now that mainstream media has moved right. Look, whenever Democrats are in power, the right's going to seem oppositional. I'm not here to shit. I'm not even here to totally shit on the ACP. I don't know how many people are even in that. I don't know that anyone else does either. Maybe not even them. I don't like Haas's politics, but Haas's politics and Midwestern Mark's politics aren't exactly the same. I don't like either one of them really. But they're a symptom. All right. They're a symptom. Just like TYT is a symptom, just like Majority Report's a symptom, just like Jimmy Dore's a symptom. We are all in a fucking society. We are not going to pull ourselves out of our bootstraps and get beyond that. The only way that left media person can even pretend to do that is to not be captured by their audience, but then it kind of can't be their job. All I try to do on this medium is something this medium is actually good at, which is to get you guys in dialogue with each other and to teach you direct things that you can use. That's all I can really do on this medium. There's other things I do. I'm a rep for a union. Not a union I always get along with. Hell, sometimes I have meetings when I can't even come. And I don't mean that because of this job. I'm never going to schedule a video when I have a union meeting. I would rather people not think their political media consumption was actually going to tell us anything about their politics. And I would rather us try to understand why these weirdo hybrid ideologies are fucking developing than, why they're all, fucked up. People deal with those people. I mean, some of that shit's incredibly unattractive. And if you're highly alienated, it might be attractive to you. But, like most of this, it's almost a subcultural niche. You might as well be in a Star Wars or some shit. Like, look, I'm gonna say something that's gonna sound weird because I'm like the antithesis of a popular front guy. I don't believe in the popular front. I think it's been a disaster for most of its history. It liquidates way too fast. It leads to quick popularity and quick depopularity. In almost every case, it's been tried. Okay, but even I will tell people, you vote strategically locally. It doesn't matter really in the grand math of saying what a small movement votes nationally. Vote your fucking conscience, but you vote strategically locally. Right? If you miss the distinction, you don't understand levels of power. Right? If voting doesn't matter, not voting also doesn't matter. And if voting does matter locally because of knock-on effects, particularly if you're not in a big urban area, then you should do it, but do it with a fucking brain. Do not be captured. The left as a counterculture is much worse in the United States but I want to defend us a little bit. It's because constitutionally and structurally, there's less venues to even fool yourself that you could have an effect on. It's, there are victories locally in parts of Europe. There kind of is in like 3 places in the country in the United States. Man, some of these comments are getting weird. So yeah, and we aren't like, what's a popular front mean when there's no common turn or even a common form or even BRICS? Like I said, there's internal tensions in BRICS. Why do unions avoid community outreach? Is it illegal to do in the U.S.? Actually, it is dangerous. It is not totally illegal, but it is dangerously close to violating Taft-Hartley. Yes. Community unionizing has to be done in very specific limits, or you can get pulled up in the NCLB. Which is why having para-union organizations is actually really important. And I was hoping that in the early aught teens, I was hoping that would be the IWW. It didn't pan out. And then I was hoping the DSA could do that, but they got all into labor bureaucracy as a means of doing labor work. And yeah. How do you support unions outside of them? You can join the picket line if they're on strike. You can maintain boycotts. I mean, but I don't want to. There's an idea. I don't want to be like a lot of the Jacobin magazine left is and like try to idealize unions and union bureaucracy because I actually do know there was a real reason why unions became unpopular, that it wasn't just neoliberal propaganda. Right. No, I agree with you. 95% of the Americans don't have a worthwhile candidate. Or, at least not at the national level. and sometimes when I say vote strategically, I'm not saying that you should be a fool and vote for a party locally just off the party affiliation. Um, a lot of the unions actually got sclerotic because of things like I mean, that's not off topic. I was talking about it earlier. What is the likelihood of U.S. entering war in Middle East after today? I don't know. It's going to depend on what happens in the next 48 hours, but it's non-zero. And what is the likelihood of conscription if that happens? That's actually a tougher question because it depends on what you need the military to do. Automation has affected killing as well. In fact, the reason people started pointing out that there hasn't been a poverty draft since the mid-aughts, and they'll pretend like it was never real. There was a poverty draft between the 70s at the end of conscription and the first Iraq War. It went away because drones, and because bombs, and because drones. But the likelihood of conscription immediately is incredibly low. Well, I understand sorting by seniority, and there's reasons for it, and there's reasons against it, and I understand how frustrating it is sometimes as a worker. Dealing with that as a failure to deal with the alienation of the worker from the worker, because the seniority doesn't really get rid of the internal competition between workers for compensation. It just rationalizes it in favor of those who stay around, but actually also promotes counter incentives in the union. Yeah, we're talking about the difference in levels of the military. I was wondering whether lack of a 9/11 or Pearl Harbor to rally to home front meant for potential enlistment. That's a good question, and I don't know. The enlistment's down, but it's also because recruit quality is low, and unlike in the aughts, there's no pressure to lower recruit quality even more. I mean, they did that in the aughts, and I don't think they're going to do that now. A lot of people can't meet the requirements. You're right. There's also subcontracting, which reduces the need for soldiers, but it increased the cost. That's why Americans fighting the Houthis is so expensive. But even today, like even when I talk about the return of Clausewitzian warfare in Russia and Ukraine, you're still not dealing with total mobilization like you saw even in the middle of the 20th century. And yes, it's absolutely fucking gruesome. The costs of that war are not totally clear to us. I had a friend who was like, "Oh, what's happening in Palestine is 100 times worse than the casualties in that war," and I actually looked it up, and no, it's not. And it's just the brutality of the Palestine Gaza situation is so fucking obvious. I mean, so many dead non-combatants and children. Yeah, and Ukraine is close to total mobilization because relatively low populations and birth rates anyway. But yeah, combat loss is absolutely not. We talk about existence itself and how annoying it is. Well, of course, existence is annoying. Even as a socialist, all I'm promising you is everyday unhappiness and like some peace and a little bit less competition, and that we will have less arbitrary shit like what social status we're born under decide everything for us. I'm not promising you fucking happiness. My God. Who would dare make such an idiot claim? The proportional casualties in Gaza are similar to what happened in Belarus when the Nazis invaded. But the real casualties in Russia, Ukraine are early World War II bad, and these are kind of casualties that we haven't seen since the Cold War. It's all very gross and tragic. And I don't want to get into. I mean, the Ukraine situation is a situation where I think humanitarianly, even if it puts Russia on a slightly better negotiations situation, we should be pushing for our government to encourage a ceasefire no matter what. I thought maybe calling for Palestinian citizenship and voting rights on the ousting of the Linquist Netanyahu party would be better than the continual call for decolonization. I don't know. As a youngish guy, seeing people cheerlead war in any direction is like, oh, fuck, I'd be dead by now. Fuck that. On Theory Underground, Crone was trying to uphold the Marxist utopian vision of everyone at Gotha, which I suppose is not the promise of happiness at all. I don't listen to Theory Underground. I don't really listen to Sublation unless people tell me to. I mean, Sublation is a little bit closer to me because I worked with Doug Lane for over a decade, and I don't have, I mean, despite having strong political disagreements with him, I don't actually have strong personal hatred for him at all. Yeah. I'm worried. I have friends whose their family got out of Palestine or in Lebanon, and I don't know how they're going to be doing. I don't know. It's been a brutal 2 years for me. Oh, critique of the Goethe program. Oh, you mean Gotha program? I mispronounce it too. I always say like the Goethe program, like it's a poet, and I know I'm mispronouncing it. I used to be fairly good at least Bavarian German, but now I'm not. My pronunciation's gone to total shit, and I can't even always remember it. I don't like I don't like I said, I don't hate any group. You get cynical after being on the left for years and years and years and years and years, man. Unless you're one of those true believer baby boomers types. Which is not a defense of that. I mean, like, we all contribute to this failure, me included. Who's a must read in my view? Mike Davis. Even though he's dead. Other than that, read everything else critically. What's the biggest outlook shift I've had in the past decade? That's a good question. Believe it or not, I used to be a lot more annoyed by, quote, the woke campus left than I am today. Just because I just don't think, I now think that was all a tempest in a teapot. You know, I published with 4 other people, the Vampire Castle essay, and I thought the part about Russell Brand was stupid when Mark Fisher wrote it and said so, and published an article saying so. That's no longer easily findable on the internet because Louis Project let that site go down before he died. But nonetheless, I was more annoyed by that. Now I just kind of think that's bait that we should avoid. Am I too busy for poetry? No. Although I'm writing a book on the last 10 years of left politics, which is making me too busy for poetry, and I've been too sick. I slowed down my production so I have a high number of students in my care. It's over 250 something. Levi Strauss is worth reading, but he's the Claude Levi Strauss is worth reading, but it is old anthropology. Read Marshall Solins to go with it. In fact, I'll suggest a couple of books right now. Let me grab. If you're in my Patreon, you know that I'm reading this with you guys. This is What Kinship Is and Is Not by Marshall Solins. And then I'd read Culture and Practice and Apologies to Thucydides, and also read Claude Levi Strauss. My class sizes are over 40, 45. What books do you recommend for getting hip to the decadence theory? The Bung ICC debates. But I'll be honest, I'm one of the few proponents of left decadence theory that isn't just about the declining rate of profits. You've taught a variety of students. Do you find more similarities in students within the same country or the same socioeconomic class? Same social economic class, hands down. My rich students in America and my rich students in Egypt shared more cultural tendencies than the working class students do with the rich students or with each other. I'm actually going to say that. I know that it's still probably true that the working class in Egypt and the working class in America share something in an abstract sense, but their cultural touchstones are totally different, where the upper and the middle class bourgeois ones were the same. Any Magna love besides Berserk? And have you read Spirit Level? I haven't read Spirit Level. I also Magna love besides Berserk. Claymore? I like Claymore. It's not nearly as important. Where would you start in regards to McIntyre? Start with the book everyone starts with, but I'll show too. All right. After Virtue. Lester McIntyre's engagement with Marxisms. Also his book on Christianity and Marxism. Whose Justice, Whose Rationality? Read those. Oh, I love Nausicaa. I don't know. What's the thing that annoys you about teachers the most? When students lie to me. Because I'm not actually out to get them. But I understand why they do. I get why they do. I also don't like how much administrative bloat we have. We have the increase of cost of teaching students has gone up dramatically in the past 20 years. And teacher pay has gone down, and 93% of the cost of education is staffing. So where's that money going? It's going into more and more consultants and upper level board admin. Not even the site admin. Site admin do a lot of work. I don't love them. I mean, they're my boss, but they do a lot of work. I know what they do. And look, I'm not saying that the admin bloat's fake. It's not just bullshit jobs. It's actually more and more fucking paperwork we have to generate from the federal fucking government all the time. And more proof of this contracting and this subcontracting to that and interfacing with contractors. How many books can we make pull off the shelf? I have a few thousand books in this house. I have books in every room of my house. Yeah. You're only seeing a 4th of my office, and it is lined with bookshelves. Can we abolish homework? In lower levels, yes. In higher levels, no. All right, guys, I've been going for longer than I was expecting to. I need to get some rest. Yeah, I don't think we should be giving like little kids tons of homework. If you should be modeling the stuff they need to do with them. How important is writing? Writing is extremely important. I teach writing specifically. Okay. I like my pedagogical training is actually specifically in writing, which is funny because I'm an aphasiac and writing is very painful for me. Don't we have it cool to listen to Joy Division? I think go listen to Joy Division. That's a flashback. I do love me some Joy Division. Take care, guys. I do these. I'm going to do these. I'm going to try to get them done once a month. Just, you know, I just had to say something today. And I don't want to just say stupid shit on Twitter, right, or X, or on Facebook, or on any fucking social media. I'm not depressed anymore. I'm fucking mad. New Order is better. And I'm gonna take it like the rest of you, frankly. Like the point about, if anyone ever sees that I'm not gonna take it anymore, watch the movie Network and see what happens to that guy, right? Like he dies. He destroys himself. That's a movie that people really misunderstand. But you know, it predicts it. It's funny because it seems more relevant now than when it was, than like when I first heard about the movie in the 90s. Anyway. Yeah, Network. Such a good fucking movie. I want to be one of those old guys who complains about how movies have gone to shit since the 70s, so. I need help with union legality. Oh boy. Thank you guys. I appreciate you guys. Talk in the Discord. Take care.